Today, I'm joined by Rebecca from Cars Commerce, and I'm really excited to talk to her about our outlook for the year 2024 and how EVs will play a bigger role, maybe, in the US sales landscape.
Yes.
Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. It's the start of the year 2024.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about the US sales market.
Yes.
First question I want to head into, there's a lot of talk about an affordability crisis, right? OEMs have made a lot of investments into a more SUV heavy portfolio, a lot of investments into EVs, and a lot of kind of the entry models have really disappeared. How do you see that play out moving into 24?
So there's definitely a disconnect between what consumers are planning on spending and what's available in the market. So on our cars.com site, we surveyed consumers that are in market, and about half of them said, we want to spend around $30,000 on the new car. The challenge is that only about 12% of vehicles are priced at $30,000. So there's definitely a challenge there. There is an opportunity to use tools like a shop by payment, where you can go on the site, you can figure out what you can afford. And that's what we really encourage people to do. We want them to go into the dealership knowing that they're comfortable with what they're going to be spending, knowing that they're comfortable with the payments they're going to be making every month, and understanding what they can afford.
Makes sense. The recent SAR data has actually been pretty encouraging. Do you see that as still a little bit of pent-up demand from the pandemic, or do you think that will last for a while?
So I think there's a couple things going on into why people are starting to return to the car market. There was certainly pent-up demand. There's about 10 million units that were not sold during those pandemic years that consumers delayed purchases on. I think also, though, that there's so much new technology coming out that consumers are saying, what's this cool thing that my car can do now? You know, whether it's automatic braking or lane departure warnings or some of the ADAS systems, and just safer cars also. So I think that as consumers become more comfortable with the technology, while they become more comfortable with their economics as well, I think that that's why we're starting to see people return to the new car market.
And I think that's maybe a good segue to talk a little bit more about EVs.
Yes.
I feel like for most of 23, there was a growth story around EVs. I think the sales numbers actually support that, but there was a market shift in the tone in the media the last few months of maybe it's more pessimism around EVs. How do you see that kind of play out into 24? Are we going to see real headwinds on EV adoption, or are we going to see continued upward trajectory?
So electric vehicles are always a challenge because it's something that's so different and still so new to a lot of consumers, even though we're more than 10 years in now. I think that the biggest challenge that consumers have is uncertainty over charging. You know, when you know exactly where you're going to fill up your gas car. So you're like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to go to the gas station. But unless you know where your charger is, or if you have one in your home, there is a level of charging anxiety. It's less range anxiety because now EVs get hundreds of miles to a charge, but where are you going to charge it? And so this is one of the biggest issues that we face. What we do find, though, on the site is that about twice as many people are actually shopping for hybrids or plug-in hybrids. And I love the idea of a plug-in hybrid. It sort of gets you used to plugging in your car, just like when we started to have to plug in our phones, right? Growing up as kids, we never plugged in your phone. And so now you have to plug in your car. So, you get that experience of driving a vehicle that has some electric range and that you kind of get to know in your neighborhood, where can I charge my car without making the full commitment to an electric vehicle.
So a bit of an easier entry point.
But exactly. It's a nice sort of segue into a full EV.
Yeah. So let's maybe combine the two things we talked about, right? Affordability and EVs. And let's talk about used EVs.
Yes.
Right. So far, it's really been a one brand market based on the supply. Now that new models are really coming into the used car market, what are some of the key considerations consumers have as they look at the used EV market?
The key concern, of course, is battery life, right? What does that look like? And so again, this is where you need to do your research. You can go onto the cars.com site. You can get an idea of what a vehicle the type of battery health that vehicle may have. I think that, again, a used EV is a great opportunity to ease your way into EV ownership. You're not making the significant financial commitment that a new car involves, but you can get a feel for what it's like to own an EV. And it is fascinating because they really are fairly new to the market. And so it is something that people need to research, come onto the site to cars.com and you can really learn about what it's like to own and to purchase a used EV.
Yeah. And I feel like the pricing is really interesting, right? With so much fluctuation on new car pricing, you have the IRA incentives. Used cars are kind of on the second part of that equation, and there's a lot of uncertainty.
There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of information out there that can be really overwhelming and really confusing. And then when you attach government incentives to it, something like the IRA, which basically encourages manufacturers to bring production to the U.S., not to North America, but specifically to the U.S., then that's a whole nother conversation then that the manufacturers are having and their suppliers as well. But I think, again, for the consumer, it's really about saying, does an EV fit my lifestyle? Should I look at a used vehicle? Should I look at a new vehicle? It's really about doing your own research, learning about what's best for your lifestyle.
I think that's a great way to end. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to how it plays out in the end of the year.
Excellent. Always exciting. Thank you so much.
Thanks.